Welcome back to the 253rd episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including how finally the House is moving forward with this massive bundle of bills that they're going to put together into one big one. We have lots of criticism and talk about that. We have an interesting article coming out of Louisiana talking about the change of child labor laws, as well as one talking about the shortcomings of people and how we're really offended nowadays in this culture, or at least that's how I took it. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. Now, there's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. This one is going to be strictly based off of the first article, which is, do you like this approach? Do you like the way that the House of Representatives is breaking up these little parts of the bill, these different sections of funding plus the TikTok bill, in order to appease different coalitions and then get it all put together basically in the same format that the Senate had written one out before, so therefore it will be easy to pass in the Senate? Is this one way to do it? Break it up so different coalitions can actually vote on it, and instead of trying to do these giant omnibuses that we've done in the past? I have some very particular criticism, or at least commentary on that when we get into it, but I want to know your opinion before we get there. So, with all that said, leave it down in the comment section. Let's jump into the first article that comes from the New York Times. And the headline reads, "The bill finally made it through on Friday," essentially. I'm not going to read the actual headline because I just have the quotes from it here in front of me, because the New York Times is a paid subscription, and leaving it up is, it can be a little bit tricky when I'm trying to go through it. So I pulled out some quotes that I thought were very memorable from it. But as always, go read the entire article. The link will be in the description below that like and subscribe button. So the opening paragraph starts like this. Quote, "The House took a critical step on Friday towards approving a long-stalled package of aid to Ukraine, Israel, and other American allies, as Democrats supplied the crucial votes to push the legislation past Republican opposition so that it could be considered on the floor. The 316 to 94 vote cleared the way for the House to bring up the aid package, teeing up separate votes on Saturday on each of its parts. But passing those measures, each of which enjoys bipartisan support from different coalitions, was not in doubt, making Friday's action the key indicator that the legislation will prevail." So, what they're doing here is very, very clever. They're saying, we know that an overwhelming bill, when all of them are actually packaged together, when we get to the Senate, it will make it through. And when they're looking at the coalitions in the House, they're like, okay, if we try to vote on all of this together, there's going to be enough people who say, hey, no, I don't want Ukraine aid. There's enough people who are going to say, no, I don't want Israel aid. People that say, hey, no, we shouldn't give money to Taiwan, or we don't want to have a TikTok in there. There are enough people with all those within all those separate coalitions that it probably wouldn't pass, or at least they would use their position to leverage a change in something else. So it would just cause too much havoc. And Mike Johnson is sitting here like, okay, I'm just going to push it through. I'm going to find a way. It is my job to make sure that my people, when they go back to their states, especially coming up with this election, that they have something to tout for their people. So for the people who really have a constituency that love Israel, maybe we're talking about certain Republicans who are in New York. And yes, I know I'm being a little bit stereotypical there, because not all Jews like Israel. I mean, that's fair enough. But maybe we say the Orthodox Jewish community in Florida, maybe some of these House members, they say, yes, my people would really like this funding to go to Israel. They have family members there. Whoever it is, if it's rural Montana and there are a whole bunch of people there who support Israel for any given reason, now there's a little bit of red meat that these representatives can throw to the people. And guess what? For the people who really like Ukraine, their constituents really want them to fund Ukraine, the exact same thing. Also, he doesn't want the accusation that the Republicans can't do anything, that they're just stalling everything, to actually be something that is put in campaign ads and sent out to everybody across the nation saying, look, the Republicans couldn't even get their house in order. So this, one, gets things moving that need to be approved in Johnson's mind and the rest of the U.S. Congress's mind. It also gives a little bit of red meat to the people who are coming back up for re-election, which is practically everybody in the House. And then also he can say, hey, look at what we did. It was a little bit hard, and we had to overcome some hurdles here, and we even did it in a bipartisan way. All of those things can actually be leveraged, or at least talked about in a very positive way when comes campaign time. So I think if you're doing a political calculation, at the end of the day, this is smarter rather than dumber. Now, are you going to have something like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, like a Thomas Massie saying, okay, hey, you did something where you put a whole bunch of things on the table that we won't want, even though there's that one little juicy tidbit that I'm okay with, we're going to do the motion to vacate. Yeah, that may not work out well for him. And that political calculation, he may be thinking a little bit more long-term than his speakership, but we'll see how it all pans out. I don't necessarily think that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie are actually going to be able to get him out because there are so many things that could be liked here. Then again, only 94 votes came in for Republicans against it. The interesting thing is that's not even actually a majority of the Republican caucus, though, so I think he's safe. We'll see, but I think he is safe. So how did this all work out on the floor, basically? Quote, on the floor, Democrats held back their votes until it was clear that there were not enough Republican support for the measure to pass without their backing. Ultimately, 165 Democrats voted for the measure. More than 149 Republicans also supported it. Democrats, once again, will be the adults in the room. This is a quote from a congressman. Quote, and I'm so glad Republicans finally realized the gravity of the situation and the urgency with which we must act, said Representative Jim McGovern of Massachusetts, the top Democrat on the Rules Committee. But you don't get an award around here for doing your bleep job. Mr. McGovern blamed the MAGA minority that doesn't want to compromise for the long delay on sending aid to Ukraine. And whether or not you like it, whether or not you think that it's actually the MAGA minority, which is, I'm going to be honest, it's not just MAGA, because there are people who have been in these coalitions, Thomas Massie and some other, like I believe Chip Roy also, they're not just MAGA, they are really spending hawks. They're just saying, they're like, no, okay, I don't care if it falls within the MAGA agenda. I don't care if Donald Trump puts it on my desk. We do not need to spend more money. So it's not just the MAGA minority, but yes, there are a lot of people who are deficit hawks / spending hawks on the MAGA side, but that doesn't mean that they subscribe to everything MAGA. But I understand where Mr. McGovern is coming from. He has to do his little political angling, and of course he has to take credit. Oh, of course Democrats have to be adults in the room here. Well, what about the other Republicans who were totally on board? And you can't obviously understand where those Republicans who have a principled stand against it are coming from. Some of them don't have a principled stand, like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Maybe they say they have a principled stand. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with them and just kind of poke at that principle and say, okay, so you voted for this but not this. Why didn't you vote for that? Or why did you vote for that if this same principle holds? Is it just because it's getting bipartisan support? There are lots of different questions here. And of course, McGovern is going about his little political maneuvering the way that he wants to. But I think he does have a really good point. And I think overall the author's kind of pointing at something too, which is there are certain Republicans that had in the previous part of these negotiations, when the bill was coming up, I believe it would have been there was a separate bill technically, but when these funding arguments were coming up 4 months ago, I also believe there was a push for it like 6 months ago, and right before Mr. Johnson actually came in, there was also a push onto McCarthy. They said, hey, break them up. break this omnibus funding up into different packages, and then we can vote on each one separately. And of course, these funding packages are not fully broken up. It's not like you're eliminating everything. You're saying, okay, this is Ukraine. There's a little bit of extra red meat in here for certain other people to vote for it, but it's mainly focused on Ukraine and things that are adjacent to that. Same thing for Israel, Taiwan, and for the TikTok bill. So yes, they are pretty much broken up, and it allows people to just vote issue by issue. It's kind of what they were asking for. They were saying break it up so we can vote on it and actually examine whether or not the arguments made, the things that are within this bill, are completely legitimate and whether or not they will satisfy our people. And then guess what? If we don't vote for it, we can say, hey, we tried to block this to our constituents. And I know they didn't outright say that, but that's definitely a political calculation where at least if it's broken up, then they can say, hey, we get people on the record from the other side of the aisle for where they stand on very specific things rather than a giant omnibus. So they can't go home and claim, oh, well, I had to just vote for the omnibus. There were some things in there that I really did like. I just had to vote for it. That was part of the argument. And now that things are broken up and you're able to see that there are actually separate coalitions that will approve all of it, and it's going to get through because of that, there's certain people within the Congress that are still mad. And then that raises the question. So did you really want to do it because you didn't agree with the issues? You just wanted to get other people on the record? Both of these things achieve what you want, because the things that you don't like, if it's all of them, guess what? You can vote no on all of them. But if you like something in particular, you don't have to vote for it and approve all the other stuff that would come in the omnibus. So it raises the question of, really? Did you really want to do that, or were you just trying to make a political argument that you knew wouldn't work because you're like, oh, just break up the omnibus, and that's not how they were going to do it procedurally. Mike Johnson is now doing something akin to that, and if they're still hollering and screaming and protesting, the only thing that they are probably doing it for is a political calculation. And what I mean by that is they're trying to grow their fame. They're just trying to get Johnson out of there. Or they don't want to do anything that has bipartisan support. And I heard this argument from some major commentators at first. I was like, no, okay, they're not. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Why would they be in the House of Representatives? Why would they be in the Senate if they weren't willing to work with people across the aisle? Like, they believe what they believe, but they understand that in governing, we have to give up some of our highest values, some of our most sacred freedoms in order to be a part of society and live in a community of people with different values. Whether or not I like it, sometimes you have to compromise. Sometimes you have to work with other people. And that's who I would assume we're sending to the House and the Senate. And then again, I have been proven wrong over and over again, and I knew in the back of my mind that's not actually true. But when I heard those comments from people that were, being angry, they were doing the angry voice, oh, these people they're just there to grow their fame. I was like, oh, come on, dude, give them the benefit of the doubt. And my instinct was to say, no, we need to believe in people's better nature. They are there to actually work with other people and, get their message out there, get their certain policy proposals out there, represent the people. And then I started remembering, well, no, wait, there's that instance. Maybe they're not actually doing that. And I've called out Matt Gaetz before on the whole vacating the speaker thing as well. And it's one of those things where I just viscerally responded initially like, no, okay, I believe in these higher ideals. And then I had to take a second and be like, okay, wait, no. Yeah, he's kind of right on this one, or they're kind of right on this one. So it really frustrates me when you get exactly what you want. You were pressuring Johnson. You were saying that he is not loyal to the party. You do almost exactly what he wants. And then when you do it, when he does it, you still come after him and say, it's not enough. It's not pure enough. It's not exactly how it should be. It's just frustrating. And whether or not I agree with all of the bills separately. Okay, so if I was in Congress right now, I would probably vote down the TikTok. I would probably vote down the Ukraine. And I would probably vote down the Israel. The China, the Taiwan one, you're getting my full support. I would argue that we need to be giving more than we're currently giving them. But yeah, I would vote for that package. And let's be clear. I have stated this before. I am always open to national security arguments, whether or not on principles or at least on the current way that I look at it. Hey, this spending is not necessary. I don't want to put out those extra dollars into places where I don't feel like it will be properly, I don't feel that it will actually serve our interests. But then again, I am always open to those sort of arguments about national security, and I realize I have a little bit of a weak spot in my heart for there. So maybe my vote would change a little bit if I had some more people that were a little bit more convincing and willing to work with me on those sort of things, especially if they said, okay, hey, we know that you don't want to give all this Israel aid, or you don't want to give all this Ukraine aid. Maybe we actually scale back, maybe $5 billion from each, and we actually reallocate it towards Taiwan because we know that's something that you're very hawkish on. And then I would say, okay, now I can work with you. Now I understand. Sounds like a good deal to me. Blah, 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 blah. So once again, the point that I'm trying to make here is that I feel as though as a citizen who should be more principled in the way that the representatives have to make the deals, the people that hold them accountable have to be the ones with the principles. I'm over here saying, hey, I could make a deal, and some of these representatives are out there being like, no, what? No, deal making? That's not why I'm here. And it's just really frustrating. If you can't tell, by the way, I've gotten louder and I've started talking a little bit quicker. So that's the side that I'm laying out here. There are some Republican copes. There are some Republican comments, and I want to address them because I feel as though it's not fair to just not talk about them. It is buried at the bottom of the article, which is ironic. They probably should have put both the quote from the Republican and the Democrat within like one paragraph of each other so everybody could read it, but no, of course not. Quote, Republicans also have needed Democrats to pass several major pieces of legislation. Those include multiple spending measures to keep the government funded. So basically, I don't want to read this whole section because they just list why the Republicans didn't like it. One of them is actually inclusion policies at the Pentagon, which I thought was funny. They're calling out Tuberville. And yes, I understand they said Congress overall. But Tuberville's in the Senate, so really, it doesn't apply to this current battle going on in the House. But I just thought it was funny. New York Times doing New York Times. Quote, Representative Mike Burgess, Republican of Texas and chairman of the Rules Panel, said he wanted the Biden administration to provide more information about how previous foreign aid funding was used and what its long-term goals were for ending the conflict in Ukraine. He said Republicans would continue to push for accountability, but concede that today we are at an inflection point. A lack of aid now could cost us much more dearly later, and I don't want that to be a reality. So he's kind of given the perspective of the mainstream Republicans like, okay, hey, we need to address this now. But he's also throwing in there that middle ground statement, which is, hey, we need to understand where this money is going. We want to make sure that we have an accurate tracking of everything that's going on over there. We want to make sure that when our money goes there, it is being used appropriately. We want accountability. And if I was there on the ground, and let's be clear, I maybe sounded really arrogant. Like, oh, yes, if I was a representative in the House. Alex, you're not smart enough to be a representative in the House, so maybe I shouldn't pretend like I was. But if I was to take that deal that I had given a second ago, saying, yeah, we'll shave off a little bit for Ukraine and Israel to give to Taiwan if you work with us, I would say, okay, there's only one more addendum I need. I need more accurate tracking on this money. Whether that comes from understanding exactly where the wire deposits go, whether that's actually watching the bank accounts of the people who are not necessarily directly involved because we're already probably watching those, but adjacent and seeing if there are extra inflows, and then there happen to be some missing little bits of money. Yeah, I could definitely be in favor of that. And this is a gentleman. This is right here. This is Mr. Burgess. This is a gentleman who's saying, yes, okay, it's going to be rough, it's going to be hard, it's going against some of the principles that I 100% believe and stand for, but we need to get this done. And also, we're not just going to say we need to get this done and give up. We're going to do it. Hey, we need to get this done. You need my votes, and I'm going to use that as leverage to get something out of it, rather than just standing back and saying, hey, yeah, no, we're not going to exploit any leverage because you need our votes. We are just not going to do anything. Then again, the libertarian inside of me is like, yeah, hey, let them do absolutely nothing. But if I'm looking at it from a practical point of view, like it's going to happen anyway, use your leverage. And guess what? They've gone to Democrats now. So any Republicans that complain about it, you lost your leverage when you said that you wouldn't vote for it at all, because then they're going to go over to Democrats. And that's what really enrages some of the Republicans. They're like, you have to rely on the Democrats. Yeah, because you didn't take advantage of the situation you were in and use your leverage properly, besides just saying don't do it or you're out. It feels like non-practical thinking, but also feels like non-political thinking. It feels like you're not someone who's actually understanding I had to go back to the first quote, the seriousness, the gravity of the place that you are in. When you step into the House, the America's epicenter, the legislature, supposed to be the most powerful branch, and you just sit there and say no, no, no to everything, you could affect actual change. And whether that be cutting money that's going out to places that you don't agree and therefore trying to lower the inflation rate, or trying to actually save money so that future generations don't have to take on that debt, or if you're a progressive, whether or not I agree with the policies, give out money to crucial groups that need this funding in your point of view. Come on. Just sitting there saying no, no, no. It's as if they don't realize that their duty is not to themselves, and it's not just to the people that they represent. Of course, 90% of it is, but also they're there to help America as well. And sometimes you have to do things that your people around you in your county aren't going to necessarily like, in your district aren't going to absolutely love, but it's for the betterment of them in the long run and the betterment of the nation. And it's just frustrating when people don't realize that. But hey, these people will have great contracts at media companies in the future, and we will hear them yelling and screaming again, just like they're doing it from the pulpit now, just on TV or on YouTube or on Rumble. So with that said, let's jump into our second article. I spent a lot of time on that first one, but it was really, really important. This one comes from DailyKos. And the headline reads, "What the bleep is going on in Louisiana?" And it's HE double hockey sticks. But, I tried to bleep the first time the other day, and I could very well bleep it out again. But I'm actually preparing this before I go on a journey. So I'm trying to get this out and make sure that I can get it all edited beforehand. And that adds probably an extra 30 minutes because I'm not 100%, how should I say? I have not developed the skill set properly. But speaking of developing skill sets, when we're younger and parents probably say, hey, you need to start working, you need to start making money, you need to start developing some of those skills that are going to be good for employers. At least that's what my parents were doing when I was a youngin'. Louisiana is actually changing some of the work laws around minors. And this article ain't happy with it. They are not happy with it whatsoever. So I'm going to read you the first two paragraphs, and then I'll read you another section, and then I'll point out where they're practically wrong on most things, because I actually went and read the text of the legislation that they're talking about, and there's a little bit of misunderstanding or intentional twisting. So we'll get to that here in a second. But first, let's do the first paragraph. Quote, "Today, the state of Louisiana managed to do something I didn't think was possible. They found a new low. Once Jeff Landry, a far-right acolyte, was elected governor, I knew the place was going to be in rough shape. The state legislature is hopeless. With veto-proof GOP supermajorities in both chambers, the state's Supreme Court has a Republican majority as well. The Democratic Party is in a state of absolutely struggling to remain relevant. It's a sad picture. Yesterday, a committee in the State House decided that the ungrateful kid peasants who don't deserve a lunch break, that's right, not only is child labor back in Louisiana and other red states, the poor souls stuck doing the work don't even get the privilege of lunch if the GOP has their way." So, wow, okay, hey, kids not getting a lunch break. What is going on here? Child labor is allowed back in Louisiana. Just do a quick Google. I want you to do a quick Google. What is the legal age that you can work in Louisiana? Google is based in California. They have a lot of people who donate to Democrats. That doesn't mean that they're going to have a left-wing bias all the time, but just Google it, And with that information, that context provided, what does it say? 14 years old, okay? And you have to have a worker permit when you're 14. And guess what? Almost every state, including Virginia, where I used to live, Kentucky, where I live now, Texas, federally, I am almost certain about federally because it also showed up when I was Googling it. The age is 14. So is that child labor? I don't know. Okay, maybe you think it's child labor. I was working at 14, and guess what? During a school week, school day, you can only work 3.5 hours. Guess what the provision is in the law that they're talking about? It says that if you work for longer than 5.5 hours, instead of a 30-minute lunch break, they can actually just give you a 20-minute lunch break. Okay, so there's only 2 days out of the week that you could actually work that long in a row anyway. It would be the weekends. So fair enough. Hey, they're cutting down on their lunch break time. I want to also ask you a separate question. Anyone who is actually working at a young age and actually wanted to do it, and let's be clear, I'm not trying to say everybody wanted to do it. There were certain jobs I worked when I was younger that I absolutely hated, and I wanted that lunch break so bad. Like some of the manual labor job that I did when I was younger, sometimes I just wanted to blow through and not have to take the lunch break, and they said, no, you have to. But the other days, I was like, heck yeah, I want that lunch break. It's mandatory. Give it to me. And then when I was a ski instructor, for most of the years when I was on a working permit, that was my main job, and I was still a minor, they were saying, oh, no, you have to take this 30-minute lunch. I'm like, I don't want to. I have 2 lessons planned. If I go to this lesson and the next one, I can probably get tips. I got kinder school after this. Like, I don't want to take a break and go grab lunch. Can you just bring me something back? And they're like, no, you have to. So I understand where they're coming from. The fact that an employer doesn't have to give it to one of their underage employees, their minor employees who are working on work permits, it can lead to abuses. But I will tell you now, there are some children who are just that motivated who are going to be fully happy with saying, okay, hey, it's only a 20-minute break. Great. So this is so, one, I think that the article presumes that everybody just doesn't want to work. But also, there's the underlying thing where they kind of just misinterpreted the bill, and it's not even passed yet. So I think it was a little bit disingenuous from DailyKos. I didn't want to spend too much time on it. I want you to at least go to this article, and I want you to go and read the proposed bills, because I want to know if I'm crazy, because it says the previous was 30 minutes. The present bill will be 20 minutes. That's what I saw when I pulled up the laws that they're talking about here. The work compensation, that's a little bit different, but that one I have less strong opinions on, and honestly, that's not the picture that they show in this article, which is all about child labor. And I feel like I'm reading it right. I'm going to be honest. They're both one page. It doesn't feel that crazy. But hey, go and read it for yourself. Tell me what you think. If I'm crazy, come back. But also, tell me if you're one of those people that just wanted to work through lunch when you were on the permit, throw it down there. If you weren't, throw it down there too. Say, Alex, no, you're just freaking crazy. You're a workaholic. Hey, I don't know what to say. I didn't want to. When you do something you love, when you do something that you're actually enjoying, sometimes you just want to keep on going. You want to keep the roll going. And if anything, you say, oh, well, I have to work 8 hours anyway. Like, I can only work 8 hours anyway. Make the most out of those 8 hours and leave 30 minutes early. Hey, I used to do that. That's how I worked an internship like that. Then again, I didn't get the job, so maybe that says something. But at the end of the day, some people are going to want to plow through things and some people are not. And I think this author and this article is coming with a very specific belief that people don't want to work. And I'm here to say that's not the case. But hey, you know what? Let's just get rid of all minor work. Let's get rid of work permits. You can't work until you're 18. Let's see how many summer jobs are not filled anymore. Let's see how many pools shut down, how many lakes shut down, all these sort of things. Just, hey, come talk to me. Hey, let's have a conversation about it. Bring me some statistics, because I'd love to break that down, because I was a summer worker. So I know full well that basically everybody that I was working with, maybe except 2 of them, were all kids on work permits. And that place, I'm not saying it wouldn't function without us, but it was rolling because of us. It was moving fast because we could just, go break our shin and keep going working versus some of the other people that would have been there working. So, yeah, this idea that kids don't want to work. Sometimes kids do. Kids want some money. They want some spending money for themselves. Maybe their parents just want them to go do something, and then they find out when they work they actually enjoy it. maybe this should be something we normalize again rather than completely criticize and say, no, you have to have fun years with no responsibility whatsoever. Hey, that's a values, that's a cultural argument. Sorry, I got really far off track. So I want to go to our last article that comes from National Review. And honestly, this is one of the funniest articles that I saw because it is saying something so stupid and kind of funny, but also trying to be serious. And I was like, what? So let me just read you the intro paragraph. Quote, "Short guys like us," a friend of mine said to me recently, "should never get their picture taken when they're standing next to someone tall." Short guys like us? What's that supposed to mean? I said, not exactly in those words. I used a colorful Anglo-Saxon vulgarism in there once or twice for emphasis. My friend is in fact a short person, reaching barely 5'7" when fully dressed. I am 5'9", which is in fact a statistical average for, okay, so one, he goes on, the statistical average for my lineage, and I'm like, okay, wow, you're going over the top here. The ironic thing is, when he is just going about his day, he's actually 5'8.5", and he admits that in the end, and it's kind of a little joke. It feels like he's kind of poking at himself here, and I'm like, my dude, why does this matter? Why? Okay, if you are a short, I guess actually there's a whole terminology around it nowadays. If you're a short king, I'm honestly, I'm not a short king. I don't fall in that category, but also, when I slouch, I don't reach my full height unless I actually extend my back. Yeah, I'm a little bit shorter. Like normally I would run maybe 5'10", 5'10.5". I'll probably look 5'9", maybe 5'8.5" when I'm slouching. So yeah, throw me in the short king category if that's the bar, because guys, at the end of the day, it's not about your height, it's what you bring to the situation. And the author goes on here to talk about, well, also, yeah, there's this situation around a friend that is a girl who says that her chubby friend wanted to go out and go shopping, and they made a comment like, oh, chubby girls shop together, something to that effect. And then he said after that, oh, I could never not see her as chubby. I thought she always just had a shapely manner, but I saw it now. I'm like, guys, it ain't that deep. It ain't that deep. Okay? Let's be honest. If you as a person, if on the tall thing, that's hard. Okay, you can do some stretches to, get your posture a little bit better if you're doing it because of slouching. Some things are just genetic and you gotta accept it. On the chubby one, if that person who is chubby has an issue with it, then they can affect change. Otherwise, I don't give a shit if you're 300 pounds or you're 200 pounds when it comes to a work context, or if it comes to a friend context, on solely are you able to be a good friend, or solely are you able to do your job well? What do you bring to the table? Now, for your health, yeah, I may say, hey, like if you're 300 pounds, I want you to live a long time. I want you to meet my kids. I want you to have your kids. I want you to be around. I don't want to have to adopt them as the godfather, whatever the argument may be. So, hey, lose a few pounds. But if we're talking chubby, if we're talking like an extra 2, 3, 4 pounds, and it's not going to affect health and they're just a little bit broader, guys, it ain't that deep. Come on. I'm not saying the whole, oh, everybody just love themselves. And I'm like, no, we don't have to overthink it that much. Okay? These things are internal standards that we hold with ourselves. If you're insecure about it, and let's be clear, I am insecure about things just like anybody else is. But you have to work on it yourself. You don't have to try to lash out. You don't have to make a whole article about it, even though you did make me giggle a little bit. So if you want to go read the whole article and this author's internal thinking about the whole situation, please go do it, because it is honestly funny. Maybe I just misunderstood the point of the article. And if this author somehow one day listens to this and he's like, Alex, you are so dumb. That's not what I was saying. What I'll say to him is I read it at 5:30 in the morning, and you got a few laughs out of me, so thank you. And I hope you were being sarcastic. If you weren't, talk to me. Hit me up on the Twitter. That's why the Twitter is in the bio there, in the description. So you can leave a comment on this video, you can hit it up on the Twitter, you can get me ratioed, whatever you want to do. So with all that said, let's jump into our Daily Delight. And this one really is a beautiful one. So it actually comes from the Sacramento Bee, which is one that I've never actually used before, I won't lie. but it talks about how a new family member has made it into the California Zoo at Atascadero. Sorry if I mispronounced it. But guess what this little guy is? A baby mongoose lemur. These guys are almost extinct. Or I say that back. They are on the endangered list. And they have been trying to breed more mongoose lemurs. And they're on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List. So they track them, they send them around to breed, and gosh, these guys are beautiful. I mean, they're amber eyes, the little baby nestled up in mom. I mean, absolutely adorable, super cute. If you don't like raccoons, maybe you won't like it, but the little baby guy's face, 100% worth it. So if you want to see either of these cute guys, the mama and the baby, or you want to read any of today's articles, like I mentioned before, there's a link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, which I'm pretty sure is dead by now, but who knows, Podvine, as well as, if you want to call me out, you want to ratio me, that Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post the Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, thank you for joining me for this episode. There's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.